is this? What? Yo, what is this? Why? Hey, let's have a talk real quick. Hear me out. Instead of having having to look up my name, maybe looking at the video, 2, 3, 4 clicks, just hit that one down there, right? Hear me out, and it saves you time. I recommend it, honestly. If we switch those numbers up, it's sick. It saves your time. Good old predictions. Am I right? Predictions, crazy thing. You either look really smart or you look pretty dumb at the end of the day. So, gonna go into it pretty straightforward. There's some new teams debuting this weekend, so not a lot to go into. But let's go and start off with the first two games. It is the Paris Eternal versus the Vancouver Titans, and the Los Angeles Gladiators versus the London Spitfire. So here are my predictions. Let's start off with the Paris Eternal versus the Vancouver Titans. I think that one's going to be a 3-1 or a 3-2. And then on to the LA Gladiators versus the London Spitfire. I think that one's going to be a 3-1 for the LA Gladiators. And so why I chose Paris Eternal winning over the Vancouver Titans, it was a tough one. Vancouver Titans have improved a little bit that second game of the weekend. They showed promise with Fried being their best player so far, as I predicted. He's a fantastic Zarya player and a Diva player who's always with his team at the right time. Dalton, who can always improve every weekend, and he's just a fantastic hit scan player. He had a first rough weekend, but I think all around he was still pretty good on the Vancouver Titans. And Taro, who has showed a fantastic performance. And when we look into the other side, the Paris Eternal team debuting a new kind of Paris Eternal with players like Neptuno, Khan, Elivote, Dan, Onigiri, Naga. This team has a lot of potential, but when I see it go against the Vancouver Titans, I think Paris Eternal all around has a stronger roster and also a stronger coaching staff. With like J-Mac and Get Amaze, I favor that coaching staff way more than the Vancouver Titans one. And then also look at the DPS players. Onigiri, who has been a fantastic hit scan player for years in the Overwatch scene, especially last year on the Dallas Fuel, filling in for Decay. Then you have Naga, who's always been a really solid flex DPS player all around. I felt like not a top tier one, but a solid one that is definitely Overwatch League level. And I think when it comes to his May versus Teru, it's going to be a fun battle to see. Then you have Onigiri versus Dalton. That one's also going to be a fantastic duel to see in the match. Then when you have Dan versus Shredlock, going to be an interesting one. I've never been impressed with both of these two, but I love to see what happens. Then you have Elivote and Fried. That's going to be a fun duel. I think Elivote's still going to prove that he is Overwatch League level. We saw that in the Washington Justice. We see this in Contenders. And I'd love to see how he performs on this team. He's all around been a really good Diva, a really good Zarya, and I think this will be a fantastic meta for him coming into this next weekend. Then you have Neptuno, a veteran of an Overwatch League player who's been known for his Lucio and his Mercy. I think he's going to have a pretty good time all around with his team on the Lucio this upcoming weekend. Can't really go in depth with how these teams are going to perform because we haven't seen them yet, unlike we've seen the Vancouver Titans, LA Gladiators, and so on. And Khan, as we've seen in the past in the Steel Series tournament, Khan has looked fantastic so on the BAP, which BAP is really meta right now, and I think Khan is going to be a bright spot, someone that's going to shine on the Paris Eternal in this upcoming weekend. So I think Paris Eternal all around is going to come up with the win against Vancouver Titans, but I think it's going to be a hard fight for both teams to try and get a win. It's going to be a close match all around, I feel like. Then on to the second one, the Los Angeles Gladiators versus the London Spitfire. This one was tough after how LA Gladiators performed last week, and then we have a new team, London Spitfire, coming up. Basically the core British Hurricane with Shax, Blase, and everything around that. So this is going to be a interesting match. If London Spitfire wins, I've lost full hope for LA Gladiators because London Spitfire is not looking like a top team coming into this season and more of a mid to bottom tier team London Spitfire is looking like. So I'm definitely waiting to see how this is going to perform. LA Gladiators, I do think they will improve this upcoming weekend. I think DP has noticed what has happened last weekend. He'll really push that on the players this upcoming weekend. I mean, LA Gladiators all around still has fantastic players. They still have tiny things just to improve on, and they can be fantastic. Where Moth was fantastic all last weekend, Space and Muse had some moments. They weren't all good and they weren't all bad. They were still solid all around. Bird and Kevster, I mean, they're fantastic players. I think they'll really do good on against this London Spitfire squad. And I think all around, when it comes to LA Gladiators versus London Spitfire, I hope it's pretty dominant from the Gladiators. I'm expecting a dominant win, but after last weekend, I have a hard time seeing LA Gladiators come up with the W. But when we talk about the London Spitfire, I think they're still going to have a fantastic game with this team. I mean, Blase, we've seen his May in the past, here and there, not a lot of it. I can't really talk about his May compared to like Kevster or Mirror. Then we have Shax coming in for the hit scan most likely. I think that's going to be an interesting duel seeing Shax against the LA Gladiators. If anything, Shax could pull out a couple fight wins, maybe a map win here and there for the London Spitfire, so that's going to be an interesting one to watch. Then you have the fantastic tank duo of Hadi and Molfig. These guys are going to be fun to watch this upcoming weekend. They've been a really good tank duo. in the past in contenders, British Hurricane, and I'm having high hopes for those guys going against Muse in space. So Muse space versus Hadi Molfik is going to be a fantastic tank match to watch there. And then you have the support duo, which is Kelix and Ripa. I think Moth and Shu win in this kind of duo match. I'm really interested to see how they'll perform though. Kelix has been always a up and down main sport throughout his entire time in the Overwatch League, Boston, Toronto, and now we have the London Spitfire. Ripa, we didn't get to see a lot of his days in the Overwatch League. It was like 1 or 2 maps on the LA Gladiators in the past, but I think he's been one of the better flex supports in Overwatch contenders. So I'm very excited to see how he'll perform with Kelix in the league. And I think all around, this is going to be a fun match to watch. If Gladiators loses, it's going to be pretty bad for them. London Spitfire wins, that's going to be huge for them. So this is going to be a big match, I feel like, for the first day. Then to the next 2 games, Chengdu Hunters versus the New York Excelsior, and the Philadelphia Fusion versus the Hangzhou Spark. 2 teams debuting. So let's go ahead and put my predictions in. The Chengdu Hunters versus the New York Excelsior. I think New York Excelsior may win here with a close 3-2. Then you have Philadelphia Fusion versus the Hangzhou Spark. I think Philadelphia Fusion is going to win with a 3-1. So I gotta say, the first game, Chengdu Hunters versus the New York Excelsior, that was the final game I tried to predict here on this list. This one was a tough one. You know, Chengdu Hunters came in with a strong performance in the first weekend with Gaga and Elsa in their tank line. All around, their team was really good. They dominated the Shanghai Dragons, and just, it was a fantastic weekend for the Chengdu Hunters. Now we have the New York Excelsior coming in. Fully new, something new. You have Ivy, you have Guangboom, going to be a fantastic DPS duo going against Leave and Jinmu. Then you have the tank duos, which is Yakpeng and Bianca going against Gaga and Elsa. Then you have the support duos, Friday and Jonak versus Nisha and Monk. This is going to be a close match. I feel that the coaching staff has not somewhat changed in New York Excelsior, just a couple roles moved around, a new head coach who was previously on the coaching staff beforehand. But I think all around, I think New York is going to win this one, but it's going to be a close match. I think Chengdu Hunters could pull out the win as well, and I wouldn't be surprised. This is going to be a good one. I'm going to have my eye on this one because Guangboom, Ivy, if anything, if New York Excelsior wins this match, it's because of Guangboom and Ivy, and maybe Bianca, and maybe Jonak pulls a nice play here and there. So I'm very excited to see what they do. Then until the next day, Houston Outlaws versus the Paris Eternal, Boston Uprising versus the LA Gladiators, Washington Justice versus the Dallas Fuel. Now, a lot of these games are hard to predict because we don't know how they're going to play the first day. You know, LA Gladiators and Paris Eternal being the big ones I'm talking about here. So Houston Outlaws versus the Paris Eternal. I think if Houston Outlaws performs like they did the first weekend and even improve off of that, I think they're going to come in for a hard 3-0. Then on the Boston Uprising versus the LA Gladiators, I prefer Boston a lot more than LA Gladiators right now. I mean, I've always been a fan of Boston Uprising coming in to this season, so I think they're going to pull off with a 3-2, but it's going to be a close match, I feel like. And like I said, if LA Gladiators dominates that London Spitfire game, my opinions would probably change during those 2 days with the LA Gladiators. Then on to the Washington Justice versus the Dallas Fuel. This is going to be an interesting one to watch. Washington Justice have a lot of expectations right now being a top tier team with players like Mag, Fury, Decay, Assassin, Closer, and Bebe. And Dallas Fuel has shown a solid first weekend. Obviously a really close game against the Houston Outlaws and also dominating the LA Gladiators. So I think when it comes to predicting these games right now, and I'll get into it when I go over it, Houston Outlaws versus the Paris Eternal, strong 3-0. Boston Uprising versus the LA Gladiators, a 3-2 for the Boston Uprising. And the Washington Justice versus the Dallas Fuel, I think Washington Justice is going to come out with a 3-2 or maybe a 3-1. Now let's talk about the Washington Justice versus the Dallas Fuel game. So let's get into this game, why it's interesting. You know, first off, Decay going against his former team, the Dallas Fuel. It's not like his original former team, like Gamsu, Note, and all that. I mean, Doa's on there still, but I think all around, this match is still going to be an interesting one. You have Mag and Fury versus Fearless and Hanbin. What a tank matchup. Those are both top tier tank duos coming into this weekend. Then you have the support duos, which is Jexay and Repel versus Closer and Bebe. I think Closer has improved a lot since his Dallas Fuel days, and you have Bebe, who's been on the Spark for a while, and he's all around been kind of a solid flex 4 player. So I think all around, this is going to be a fun match to watch, a very intense match coming in this next weekend, and I'm very excited to see how these duels show up with like Decay and Sparkle, seeing how they perform, maybe Trace 1v1s here and there. Then you have Assassin's May versus Doha's May. I have not seen Assassin's May in the past, so I don't know how that's going to turn out. Maybe it'll be Jerry. I mean, Jerry's still on this roster. He could play. You have Tuba still, so there may be a Shocker who could be the May player here. I've not seen Assassin's May. Keep that in mind. I don't know if he even plays May. So all around, this match is going to be pretty intense. We're going to be on the edge of our seats. It's going to be a fun one. I think Justice is going to pull up with 3-2, and if Dallas wins, I'm going to be very shocked, but it's going to be a close one. Then I'll take the next one, Hangzhou Spark versus the New York Excelsior, and the Chengdu Hunters versus the Philadelphia Fusion. Gonna go into my predictions already. New York Excelsior, I think, will come out with the victory 3-2 over Hangzhou Spark. And then you have Philadelphia Fusion coming out with a 3-1 victory. First one, let's talk about the first one real quick. Hangzhou Spark versus the New York Excelsior. I just have a lot of high hopes for New York Excelsior coming in hot in this upcoming season. I think they're going to be a good team all around. I mean, I can't ignore Hangzhou Spark's fantastic roster. I mean, you have Guzhwei, Bernard, then you have Godsby and Architect, and you have IDK and MCD. I want this team to do good, but I'm be honest. I'm kind of going off of the strong rumors that has been out there by reliable people, and then you have the Scrimbucks about Spark not doing so hot. That's mostly what I'm going off of, but I still think it will be a very close game with the New York Excelsior. I think still has a fantastic roster with, like I said, once again, Guangbong and Ivy. I do think, though, if the rumors are wrong of Hangzhou Spark, I want them to be wrong because they just have an insane roster right now of Guzhwei, Bernard. I mean, I've already said it, but I think they have a fantastic roster going into this upcoming season. So I want Spark to win this one. I want Spark to prove me wrong right now, but I'm mostly going off of the rumors of Spark right now. Then on to the final day, the Houston Outlaws versus the London Spitfire, the Boston Uprising versus the Dallas Fuel, Vancouver Titans versus the Washington Justice. Let's go over my predictions. Houston Outlaws coming out with a strong 3-0. I wouldn't be surprised if it was a 3-1 against London Spitfire. Boston Uprising versus the Dallas Fuel. I think Dallas Fuel is going to come off the 3-2 victory. It was going to be a close one. And then you have the Vancouver Titans versus the Washington Justice. I mean, that's going to be a pretty easy 3-0 for the Washington Justice coming up. I think it will be. Hopefully, the Washington Justice does not drop the ball this season. So Houston Outlaws versus London Spitfire, like I said already, I mean, Houston Outlaws dominated the first weekend. I think they're going to dominate over the London Spitfire. Then you have the Boston Uprising versus Dallas Fuel. I think this one's going to be a really interesting one to watch. I mean, this is all off of Boston Uprising has a good performance against the LA Gladiators, and I think Dallas Fuel may or may not perform against this one, so it all depends on what happens in that game. And the Washington Justice versus the Vancouver Titans. I mean, just looking at roster by roster, I mean, Justice has a way better roster compared to Vancouver Titans. I mean, if they drop a map against the Vancouver Titans, I mean, it's not that bad. I mean, Vancouver Titans is improving a little bit, but that's all there really is to it. Anyways, guys, that's it for my predictions. I'll see if I want to do more of these later on. This is my kind of like experiment, trying out if I want to do this more. We'll see. I'll decide in the future. But anyways, that's going to be for me. If you guys want to stay more in tune to Overwatch League news and Overwatch League stuff in general, don't forget to subscribe down below. Also, don't forget to join my Discord down below as well. And don't forget to follow my Twitter and my Twitch. And don't forget to hit that bell. And don't forget to leave a like, comment, and subscribe down below. And I'll see you guys on the next one.